Welcome to the Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers of Washington and its monthly author showcase. I'm your host, Mark Miller. Today I have the distinct honor to interview a friend and former co-worker, Kregg Jorgensen. Kregg has been writing and publishing both fiction and nonfiction for years, and has another new book we'll be discussing today. He and I worked together in U.S. Customs and then in Homeland Security before I retired in 2008. Kregg is a bit of a filmatic and real hero from his days serving in Vietnam, which I will harass him about later. Kregg, it's really great to see you again.
Thank you, Mark. Pleasure to be here.
So we have a standard question that we always start out with everybody in the claw hot seat, and that is, how did you first catch the writing bug? As some of us refer to this activity of putting ideas on paper and computer screens.
My father was a journalist in the Coast Guard.
Oh, okay.
So he had written for Coast Guard magazine, and a friend of his was actually Alex Haley,
Oh,
the author of Roots. And my father had instilled in me a love of books. And as a kid, you don't want to read books. You want to read comic books. You don't want to read real books. When I was in high school, I studied journalism, worked on a newspaper. When I was 18, I joined the Army and volunteered for infantry.
you didn't want to be in the information office?
What did Ben Franklin say? Ben Franklin said, either write something worth reading or do something worth writing. So I ended up in Vietnam, and then in the infantry we got sundry packages, which were out in the jungle, these bases, and included with the sundry packages of toothbrushes, candy, there would be books, and the books would always be left alone. A friend of mine would, the first thing he did, we picked up a Don Quixote. It was like an older brother type, and his name was Jim Braun, the platoon radio, and he says, "Here, kid, read this book." And I started on Don Quixote of all books.
God.
And I was wonderful. Right then and there, as I realized, I love this. But I love the power of the word. The comedy, I love comedy. And I wanted to see who wrote what makes people laugh, what makes people think. You graduate to other authors, John Steinbeck, one of my favorite authors. But in his 107-page of Mice and Men,
Oh, yes.
runs you through the gamut of emotions, will get you. If you don't have a tear in your eye at the end of that book, you're not human.
Yes.
And you look at Kurt Vonnegut, Slaughterhouse-Five, just the authors that we were fortunate to come across when we were younger. Then I went to school at night and began studying writing. And my father would always tell me, I wanted to learn the secret of writing, because there's a secret. And I knew if I went to college and took every writing course I could, that I would learn that secret. My father would say, the secret is to read good books and write. It's, read and write. And then it became, I ended up getting a job in the Army. When a colonel found out I could write, I ended up being an Army journalist. After that, I got out. I wrote for Nordstrom's. I did stuff for Kenworth Trucks, Lenny Wilkins, and Sonics on a freelance basis. And somewhere I got the idea to write a book. And I was doing freelance for magazines. I did for about a 15, 20-year period. I was selling articles to publications, martial arts publications mostly.
What was your first book?
The first book was Acceptable Loss. I sat down with a portable typewriter, a couple reams of paper, 5-gallon bucket of whiteout and a paintbrush. And I finished the book, and back then you had to box them up and send them, to the publishers.
Yeah.
It was returned twice unread. I didn't have an agent, so it was returned twice from New York publishers unread. And then the third one came home after work, a real job where you make money and can pay bills. I had an answering machine, and the answering machine said, "Hi, this is such and such at Random House, and we want to buy your book." So the first thing I did is I turned that off and called every one of my friends, and I said, very funny. Ha ha. That's not funny at all. And you thinking that trying to pretend that you're new to a publisher says, "No, it wasn't me." So I called the number, and it was Random House in New York, and I hung up because I was too afraid to say it. And then all these wonderful big dreams go through your mind. It's like, I'll quit my job. I'll go on tour. Oprah will love me. And you just realize when you're selling military books, you're not going anywhere. There's no real advertising budget. But they bought the book, and then they bought the second book. After about the fifth book I did on Vietnam, I didn't want to write about Vietnam anymore. And so I graduated to other items, books I really wanted to write.
Basically, you started out writing nonfiction, and most of the books you covered were to do with, of course, your Vietnam experience and things connected to that. So then how did you wind up getting into the fiction side?
I think there was a quote, and I want to say it was Hemingway or someone who said that there's more truth in fiction than often which people believe. And if you wanted to write something and have some fun with it, when you write nonfiction, you're always going to get people going, well, it didn't quite happen that way. It didn't happen that way. When you write fiction, people are just going, I like it or I don't like it.
Right.
So you have that luxury of expanding your world, anything that you want to go into a book, and how well you plot it, how well you lay it out, how well you revise and revise and revise. But I found it to be magical. I was always fascinated with fiction, so I wanted to do something that I could have some fun with.
So what was your first fiction book?
My first fiction book.
You brought all your books in here, and we have to talk about them.
Who would do a shameless plug?
Exactly.
I did a Western, and 1886, the last campaign, because I liked Westerns. Elmore Leonard was one of my favorite writers.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And people, when you mention the name, a lot of people just, especially today, don't understand who he was.
Yeah.
But if you say Justified,
oh
yeah, that series. But he started off writing Westerns. One of his first Westerns was Hombre with Paul Newman. So he wrote that book, it became a movie. 3:10 to Yuma was a short story.
He's the one that wrote.
He's the
Okay,
one
I didn't know
wrote
that. Yeah.
Valdez is coming.
That's the one that I've read, and I love that movie. So.
Yeah, it's in his the westerns that were very complicated westerns that the good guy isn't always good,
Right.
the bad guy isn't always evil, and there's going to be twists and turns you did not see coming. So I did the western, and probably learned westerns seldom sell.
Oh, really?
So boys and girls, if you want to make money,
don't sell westerns.
yeah, find a topic that actually sells. But I had more fun writing this book. I got to do a lot of research. Spent 4 or 5 years doing some research with it and traveling down. It's basically the last campaign in the Indian Wars.
So it's a fictionalized account of an actual
event,
right.
And you throw your characters into a real event, and then that means you have to do your homework.
Right.
And I believe I love research more than I love the writing. You get to read some great material, going, well, how can I incorporate this into it? Because there's nothing worse, as you know, there's nothing worse than writing. That's self-imposed isolationism.
Oh yeah.
Late at night. It's the best low-paying job around.
It's true.
But one of the most satisfying.
You have mentioned before that you wrote for a lot of magazines, especially your martial arts magazines. Yeah. And I know from your background that you've gotten quite involved with the martial arts, and including something I might as well throw in right now. You're involved in something that most people don't know about called wrestling.
Yes.
And this is from your law enforcement background, and you and I worked together on. So could you explain that to the audience?
1966, I started in karate at the downtown YMCA, and I stayed with the martial arts over the years. When I got shot through both thighs in Vietnam, and they didn't have much in the way of physical therapy at the time, but a lot of the stretching techniques of martial arts are based on yoga. So I started doing some of my own stretching, and maybe I didn't do it right. I kind of waddle these days, but it helped me go back to my unit at the time. I stayed with the martial arts, and I found out an important thing about writing about the martial arts. Paper cuts hurt a lot less than getting kicked in the nose. So I was very fortunate. I knew a lot of, I competed with a lot of incredibly talented people up here, and lost to a whole bunch of them. But the fun part is I got to know these people. And over the years, there were the hubs of martial arts publication at the time of the 70s, late 70s, the 80s, 90s, was Los Angeles and New York. So you had magazines out of New York, you had magazines out of Los Angeles to cover the nation. So if you were in those areas, you got covered. There was a lot of talented martial arts artists up here. Patrick McCarthy, a Canadian national champion karate, was phenomenal. Ken Lo, a Chinese kung fu instructor out of Canada. Neil Chan, another one. In the Seattle area, you had Mike Shintaku. Mike won the first gold medal in the Goodwill Games back in 1980 when the Olympics was canceled. But he took the first gold medal. Dan Anderson out of Portland, Oregon, was a national fighting champion. That guy, they called him Super Dan, and for 20 years I think he reigned in a lot of tournaments. But to have access to some of these people, judo was actually first judo dojo was Seattle, Washington. So kung fu too. We're blessed up here with having a good multi-racial society. So we have access to Chinese martial arts.
Well, most people don't even realize that Bruce Lee was in Seattle.
Yeah, started out here. And many of his students ended up still teaching. I think Taki Kimura is a gentleman who's in his 90s that still teaches. My friend Alan J. Chin is a kung fu master. Chris Chu, another one. And Chris, I want to bring that up because if you love the movie Beastmaster, he taught that guy martial arts.
Oh, really?
So so I started writing articles. I would send it down to him about some talented people. Well, the people in New York and the people in Los Angeles knew of these people. So they started purchasing one. I said, well, if one's good,
it's good.
Send them a hell of a lot more. So I started sending in more articles, and eventually I became assistant editor for Taekwondo Times, contributing editor for Inside Kung Fu magazine, and which just meant send more articles. And it was a fun experience. I got to meet some very talented people, and I'm really happy to stay with it.
But
for wrestling, Don Gula was a local. He was a King County SWAT officer. He just retired. Don was at 18 a national junior Olympic gold medal judo champion.
Oh, okay.
Kentwood High School had its own judo program. Don had been involved in judo. He was a karate, kung fu, you name it. Don was noticing that the law enforcement needed better training.
Right.
So he started incorporating mixed martial arts into what he called a wrestling. And it had to do with law enforcement officers, how to fight with your duty belt on.
Exactly.
And how to protect the weapon,
the
most important part. 6% of the officers who unfortunately are killed on the job are murdered with their own weapons or taken away. And so Don has one program that he calls GRAP, School is Weapon Retention and Positional Shooting, that has been adopted by Renner Gracie of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu family. So they have literally started teaching that in their self-defense program. But Don is a real-world person and who wants to keep the law enforcement officers safe and get them home.
One of the many academies I went to, somebody made the comment that whenever you get in a fight, there's always at least one gun yours.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people forget that.
And if you don't protect it, someone else will take it away. And then I worked with Don at the police academy on de-escalation, on crisis intervention. And crisis intervention is the key thing that they're doing now. Not just to escalate, but how do you de-escalate? De-escalation is the key. So the crisis intervention training, the CIT, Don, I think, was recognized nationally for it up here, and it's becoming adopted
Yeah.
statewide. And the more that you can have people who can help de-escalate, the better. You don't have to ramp up dangerous
Yeah.
situations.
That's very, very true. You have a new title that's kind of a unique perspective, which involves your knowledge gleaned from your days as a canine handler. Can you kind of explain your work to Claw and the BCAT audience, this specific book?
The book is Do Bomb Dogs Dream of Chasing Butterflies? And it's written from a bomb dog's point of view. You know, it's like he's supposed to be man's best friend.
Yeah.
Well, why are you teaching him to sniff out bombs
Yeah.
in Afghanistan and Iraq? I was fortunate enough to be a canine handler, and it was the best job I think I ever had. The dog did all the work, I got the paycheck. And I wanted to kind of give tribute to the bomb dog handlers, the men and women who are serving in the dangerous situations now. And they work for various police departments, various all the the casinos in Las Vegas have bomb
Right.
dogs. And so they're basically what they're trying to do is keep us safe. And the dog, all he wants to do is play. And when the dog finds something, alerts to something, and is just excited because he's found it for you, you have a wonderful, wonderful relationship with that dog. So the book is a tribute to that, about a working canine team that had first gone to Iraq and then Afghanistan.
Would you agree that our four-legged friends are probably better people than we are quite often?
Yes, except for I taught my dog to drive, so I slept my entire shift. And he was not better because every time we got to he would pull up to the donut shop and wake me up ask for money. But if you're fortunate enough to have any chance to work with dogs, take it. It's wonderful. And God bless all the vets and the vet assistants
Yes.
out there who take wonderful care of the dogs.
I've got four rather large dogs at home, so I know how to be a dog lover, though. We had this discussion before we started this interview, was that I actually wound up killing a dog off in a book, and you threatened to do me in. Yeah. But he was a hero, okay?
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but
Dogs are wonderful. And they are heroic. I mean, there's several organizations, and the British have one that award medals to heroic dogs. I think there's been 44 incidents in the British system where they've awarded medals of heroism for dogs. And, by the way, only one for cats.
Oh, okay.
So, not saying anything, but
saying anything.
44 dogs, one for cat.
Okay. So, fiction or nonfiction? Do you have a favorite between the two?
I go back and forth between the two because nonfiction gives you grist for
the fiction.
For fiction, and anything you want to set into a setting that you can find material for. I think I have a desk at home that my son calls the desk of wonders because it's stacked with notebooks, and you pull one open and it's going, whoa, what was that for? But it was some information that you gleaned from another author, or just listening to conversations and people on the ferry, on the bus.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the best dialogue you get just listening to people, listening to their cadence of speech, listening to what they're saying.
Do you have a favorite book?
Do I have a favorite book?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's of mine or somebody else's.
Well, of course, start out with yours.
I don't read me.
Okay.
I would have to think Clubs or Trumps is probably my favorite. This one is on the 1st Minnesota Regiment of Volunteers at Gettysburg.
Okay.
And what the people in Minnesota, and I have to credit my wife for this because she had a relative that kept a diary. And so he was with the 6th Minnesota. And what people don't realize is that when the volunteers left to fight the war, the Indians had attacked a lot of the settlers and killed a lot. But that was blamed on an Indian agent who just didn't really care about native issues. So they actually had to bring the 6th Minnesota back from the Civil War to quell the rebellion. So by the time that a lot of the service members of the 1st Minnesota got to Gettysburg, where they suffered the highest casualty rate out of any U.S. military unit, they had lost families and farms back home.
Right.
So now they have to face, there was 360 plus that charged 1,500 Well, people are familiar with Chamberlain's of the 20th Maine,
Yeah.
stopping that. Colonel Colville's guys of the 1st Minnesota actually stopped the charge at Gettysburg. To complicate matters, I think there was 47 who survived.
Jeez.
And of the ones that were injured and wounded, they were sent first to heal, and then they were sent to New York to quell the draft riots.
Oh, God.
So the book actually starts at Gettysburg, but it's more of trying to finesse their way through politics
Right.
of Tammany Hall at the time,
Yeah.
of just surviving, just to go home. All they wanted to do was basically go home.
Go home.
And it covers about 4 or 5 young guys, but the research on it was fun.
Yeah.
I don't think any of my children will ever go to a Civil War battlefield with me again, ever.
Never. Well, how do you publish your books? Do you have like one publisher? Are you into self-publishing now, or?
Self-publishing. I started off with Random House. I had 5 books published with Random House, and I wanted to do fiction. And you were restricted back then. Back in the old days, there were bookstores everywhere.
Right.
To get in those bookstores, you had, for placement,
Yeah.
you had to belong to big publishing houses. Thanks to the internet today, we have the option of reaching a larger audience worldwide, and self-publishing. If you don't believe in yourself enough
Yeah.
to take part in the self-publishing with small press, then why would you send it out to a large publisher where you get a lesser percentage
Yeah.
and you have less access to what you would like to write? I'm enjoying. I love the small press approach, and I get emails from people in Australia, Poland, England, and
Yep.
you're shocked sometimes.
Can you share any advice to some individual out there that would like to start writing?
Yes, take up plumbing. If you want to make money, if you're out to make a lot of money, take up plumbing. Read everything you can. Find your favorite author. What was that magical point that got you interested in reading? And what is that one book or 2 books or 3, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 authors that, it's books are magical experiences. Because we all have a favorite book that touched something in us, that made us want to read more. And I would tell any up-and-coming writer to read their favorite book, their favorite author, over and over again. Thanks now, today we have books on tape.
Yeah.
And when you're driving your car, stick one of the CDs in and listen to the cadence of what they're doing. James Lee Burke, I'll listen to James Lee Burke as I'm driving, just for the poetry of his writing style. And then it's all about stealing.
Yep.
It's like, who writes well? I can write like that. But how best to phrase something, but you learn so much from good authors as well.
I'm going to harass you a little bit. I made mention about your filmatic history, and there's a famous bit of CBS video from Vietnam, which is you were in it. You were a long-range patrol ranger.
Yes, I was there. I was on a team, several teams. One that got hit in my first Purple Heart out of. We were on a 5-man team, and we had 2 of the guys were killed, 2 more were seriously wounded, and that time we had a 6-man team, and the 2 of us were left slightly wounded. And then I volunteered for another unit that was recon and aircrew rescue. And there was nothing more satisfying in my Vietnam experience than getting to a crash site where a helicopter or a plane had been shot down, and you're going in and recovering the wounded people before the enemy gets in or before they burn. The plane crashes through jungles or not.
Yeah, and apparently there is a Ken Burns part of Ken Burns used it in his recent Vietnam series. We kept using your little vignette from CBS video over and over and over and over and over again.
I had the CBS film has been shown so many times.
Yeah.
Time Life Books used it to sell books. It was on the news when it's been everywhere.
Yeah.
And I can tell because a helicopter friend of mine, pilot, would always call me up and say, "Hey Grunt, I just saw you get shot again.
Yeah.
You think by now you would have learned to duck."
Yeah.
So it's been shown
Yeah.
thousands. Well, actually, someone who said it's on YouTube and there's 2.5 million views. And the comments, I don't read the comments. It's like reviews. Don't read your book. Don't read your book reviews. Because if people give you a 5-star and say they love you, and someone gives you a 1-star and
Yeah.
say they hate you, just keep, if you're enjoying what you're writing and you like it and you have an audience, keep going for that.
Okay.
For the news, Ken Burns, they chopped it up.
Yeah.
It was used in different areas. And my machine gunner, oh my goodness, I think every time they mentioned the Marines, they showed him firing his machine
So
gun.
he was playing a Marine.
Yeah, so I called him up and I said, hey, you're a Marine now. That's
And you're also involved in teaching law enforcement and other people tracking also. You go up
search and
and
rescue.
search and rescue
We train
tracking.
search and rescue. The military gives you a little bit of skills that you, some skills that you can transfer to civilians. I've been involved with the Tactical Tracking Operations School, and we had trained military, helped train Marine Corps, Army. A friend of ours trains the Navy. I helped train the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, native tracking kids.
Yeah.
People going, what do you mean you teach Native American trackers? Well, yeah, because their kids are like everybody else's.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're teaching, now we teach search and rescue. And we live in an area where there's a lot of hikers go missing every year, where planes go down into the woods, where kids wander off. And there's nothing more crucial than getting people in there in time to find them.
And we're going to, of course, show it on the screen here, but if you have any websites or any other ways to get a hold of you, reference your books.
Facebook. I'm on Facebook, which is a wonderful, if you're going to be a writer, put yourself on Facebook, put it out there. You'll, as I said, some of the comments will be good, some of them won't, but it doesn't matter. If, you have to get out there, you have to talk to people, and Facebook, social media gets you around the world,
Okay.
And
Well, Kregg, I really want to thank you for coming here, BCAT, and it's really good to see you after all these years. We've been talking on Facebook, but I haven't had a chance to really get to see you. One of these days we'll have to sit down and have another thing on, I guess, a show on some of the weird things. Charlene Burnett, we did, is retiring as a public access manager.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the last broadcast where she is in the studio. Claude wants to really thank her for excellent support over the past year, which helped to make this viewing his Kitsap literary artists and writers production. I also wish to thank the BCAT staff on cameras and in the director's chair. This broadcast interview is scheduled for January at 6 p.m. every Saturday, Channel 3 on Wave Cable and Channel 12 on Comcast. Keep in touch with our Facebook pages for updates on what Kitsap author will be interviewing in the future, in addition to events the author will be attending in the community. I hope everyone has a pleasant day and a productive and fascinating year. Until next time, I am Mark Miller with Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers in conjunction with Bremerton Kitsap Access Television. Good day.